The metal mop bucket's wheel shrieked across the concrete mess hall floor, a sound that cut through the lunch conversation of 60 Marines like a declaration of insignificance. Jenna Reeves pushed the yellow cleaning cart between tables, her khaki contractor pants and blue polo bearing the faded Green Zone Services logo. 5'5", 135 pounds, dark brown hair pulled tight in a regulation bun she no longer had the right to wear. At 31 years old, she'd become exactly what she looked like: invisible. The wall clock read 1300 hours, 95 degrees outside the Phobes climate-controlled buildings. Somewhere in an undisclosed Middle Eastern location, the war continued. Inside this mess hall, a different kind of battle was about to begin. Major Derek Hutchison stood at the center table, 6'1" of pressed uniform and polished confidence. Blonde crew cut going gray at the temples, Ranger tab prominent on his shoulder, leading a briefing for 12 officers about next week's training evolution. His voice carried the particular authority of someone who'd spent 15 years perfecting the performance of leadership. Jenna worked the perimeter, her mop making efficient passes across the floor. Her eyes tracked the room in patterns these Marines would never notice: exit points, sight lines, the slight bulge under Lieutenant Drummond's jacket that meant she was carrying her sidearm off-duty again, against regulations. Staff Sergeant Troy Palmer sat 3 tables away, red hair bright under fluorescent lights, that cocky grin permanently fixed on his freckled face. 5'10", 180 pounds of infantry Marine who'd learned that following the right people meant never having to think for yourself. He watched Jenna approach his table, watched her neat, economical movements, then deliberately hooked his boot under his lunch tray and sent it skidding across her freshly mopped floor. Meatloaf and mashed potatoes spread across concrete in a grotesque modern art piece. The conversation paused for exactly 2 seconds. Then Lieutenant Jessica Drummond laughed. Sharp features, brown eyes gleaming with the particular cruelty of someone fighting to belong. "Guess you missed a spot, contract lady." Palmer leaned back in his chair. "My bad. Guess I'm just clumsy today." Jenna said nothing. She retrieved her mop, began cleaning the mess with the same mechanical efficiency she'd shown before. Her jaw stayed relaxed, her breathing remained controlled. Only her knuckles, white against the mop handle, suggested anything beneath the surface. Major Hutchison noticed. He always noticed disruptions to his carefully managed environment. "Problem over there, Sergeant Palmer?" "No, sir. Just a little accident. Support personnel will handle it." Hutchison walked over, boots clicking with parade ground precision. He looked down at Jenna, still kneeling, still cleaning. "You know what we do here." Jenna glanced up. Green eyes met his for exactly 1 second before returning to the floor. "Yes, sir." The automatic military courtesy didn't register. He heard submission, not respect. "We train Marines for combat operations, real missions, real consequences." He gestured to the officers around him. "These people are responsible for lives. What do you think happens when support personnel can't handle basic tasks?" "It won't happen again, sir." "See that it doesn't." He turned back to his briefing, already dismissing her from consideration. Palmer and Drummond exchanged grins. Someone in the back pulled out their phone, started recording. The quiet humiliation of invisible people made excellent content. The double doors opened. Master Gunnery Sergeant Raymond Patterson entered, 6 feet of barrel-chested authority earned through 28 years and 6 deployments. Salt and pepper buzz cut, weathered face marked by a scar across his left cheek that had its own story. 47 years old and still moving like a man half that age. He walked to the coffee station, poured a cup that would be too strong and too black, and watched. Watched Jenna's grip on that mop handle, knuckles aligned, elbows at efficient angles. Her back never to the room, always maintaining situational awareness, even while scrubbing someone else's lunch off the floor. That wasn't the posture of a cleaning lady. That was a combat crouch. His eyes narrowed. He'd seen 1,000 Marines in his career, knew the difference between someone who'd learned to mop and someone who'd learned to survive. Jenna stood, bucket in hand. Palmer's voice followed her. "Hey, contract, you got a call sign? All the real Marines have call signs." Scattered laughter. Phones tracking her movement. She paused, didn't turn around. "No, sir." "That's too bad. How about we give you one? How about mop lady?" More laughter. Hutchison didn't stop it. In his calculation, morale building meant knowing when to let Marines blow off steam, at someone else's expense. Corporal Miguel Torres pushed through the doors, fresh from morning PT, baby face flushed from the heat. 22 years old, 5'8", earnest brown eyes that still held idealism after 2 years in the Corps. He saw the scene immediately, saw Jenna being used as entertainment. He moved to help her pick up the cleaning supplies Palmer had knocked over during his performance. "Torres, what are you doing?" Hutchison's voice cut across the room. "Just helping, sir. Stop fraternizing with civilian personnel and get your lunch." Torres hesitated, looked at Jenna. She gave the smallest shake of her head. He stepped back, face burning with shame that he'd remember for years. Jenna finished gathering her supplies. The cart's wheels squeaked again as she pushed toward the exit. 60 Marines watched her leave. Most had already forgotten her face. A few kept recording, content secured for later mockery. Patterson set down his coffee cup with deliberate care, crossed the room to Hutchison. "Major, where'd that contractor company recruit from?" Hutchison barely glanced up from his tablet. "Green Zone Services. They hire locally, I think. Why?" "Just curious." Patterson's tone carried weight Hutchison didn't have the experience to read. Seemed to know their way around a military facility pretty well. "They clean bases, Gunny. That's what we pay them for." "Right." Patterson looked toward the doors where Jenna had exited. "That's what we pay them for." He walked out, leaving his coffee unfinished. Outside, in the narrow space between buildings where the sun turned concrete into griddles, Jenna stopped, let herself take one deep breath. Her hands were shaking, not from fear, from restraint. The edge of ink showed at her wrist where her sleeve had ridden up during the cleaning. The last 2 numbers of a date most people would never see. The rest of the tattoo, hidden beneath her shirt, listed 6 names in precise script. 6 dog tags she'd never physically wear again. She pulled her sleeve down, picked up her cart, moved toward the next building on her schedule. In 48 hours, everything these people thought they knew would be shattered. But right now, she was just the mop lady, and that was exactly what she needed to be. The next morning arrived at 0600 hours with the kind of heat that made body armor feel like a personal sauna. Jenna worked outside the armory building, squeegee moving across windows in methodical vertical strokes. Through the glass, she could see Marines prepping equipment for the day's training evolution. Staff Sergeant Palmer emerged first, carrying a deployment bag over his shoulder. Lieutenant Drummond followed, both hands gripping a hard case containing optics equipment. Their conversation cessation died when they spotted Jenna. Palmer's grin returned. That default expression of someone who'd learned humor was armor against thinking too hard. "Look who's here! Mop lady's getting promoted to Windows." Drummond adjusted her grip on the case. The weight was clearly challenging her, but admitting that would cost more than the physical strain. She moved past Jenna, deliberately close, forcing her to step back into her cleaning cart. The cart tipped. Jenna's hand shot out, steadying it before supplies scattered. "Careful, wouldn't want you to make another mess." They continued toward the vehicle depot, leaving Jenna to her work. She returned to the windows, squeegee resuming its rhythm. Her reflection stared back at her, dark circles under green eyes, the face of someone who hadn't slept well in 3 years. 20 minutes later, Palmer returned for a forgotten magazine pouch. This time he carried a fully loaded gear bag, 40 pounds of equipment slung carelessly over one shoulder. He pretended to stumble near Jenna's position. The bag dropped, arcing toward her feet with enough weight to break bones if it connected. Jenna's body moved before thought could intervene. One hand caught the bag mid-fall, absorbed the momentum, set it down gently. The entire sequence took maybe half a second. Palmer froze. His grin flickered like a faulty light bulb. "Fast hands," he said slowly. Jenna returned to her squeegee. Reflex. "That's a 40-pound bag. I work out." But Palmer was already processing, already building a narrative that protected his worldview. "Bet they teach that in janitor school, huh? Catching heavy stuff?" Drummond had circled back, drawn by Palmer's change in tone. "What happened?" "Mop ladies got reflexes, caught my gear bag like it was nothing." Drummond studied Jenna with new attention. Competitive instinct activated. "Lots of people have good reflexes." "Not that good," Palmer said. But he was already moving towards safer territory. "Lucky catch." They left again. Jenna's hands tightened on the squeegee handle. Stupid, sloppy. 3 years of careful invisibility nearly destroyed by muscle memory. She forced herself to continue working. Slow movements, deliberate inefficiency. The performance of someone who belonged in this role. Her shirt rode up slightly as she reached for the window's top edge. The movement exposed 2 inches of scarred skin along her left rib cage. Surgical scars, shrapnel removal, the kind of medical work that left distinctive patterns. Master Gunnery Sergeant Patterson chose that exact moment to walk past. He didn't break stride, didn't stare, but his eyes caught the detail, cataloged it, filed it away with all the other inconsistencies he'd been collecting. Inside the armory, voices rose in frustration. "Third malfunction this week," someone complained. "This rifle's cursed. It's the firing mechanism. Something's not seating right." Jenna's hands stilled on the glass. She knew that weapon system, knew it better than these Marines probably knew their own service records. Major Hutchison's voice cut through the complaint. "Then get an armorer to look at it. We've got range time in 2 hours, and I'm not running this evolution with faulty equipment. Armor is not available until 1400, sir. Unacceptable." Jenna moved her cart toward the armory entrance. She needed to restock cleaning supplies anyway. That's what she told herself. That's what made sense. Inside, 8 Marines clustered around a disassembled M4. The rifle lay on the workbench in component pieces, each part arranged with the kind of organization that spoke to proper training, but incomplete understanding. Hutchison stood over them, jaw tight with the particular frustration of someone whose schedule was being disrupted. He noticed Jenna entering through the side door. "Contractor, you need something?" "Supply closet, sir. Restocking." He waved dismissal, already turning back to his problem. "Make it quick." Jenna moved toward the closet, but her eyes tracked the disassembled weapon, saw the issue immediately. The firing pin spring showed the telltale compression pattern of the defective batch. She'd seen it before, written reports about it that probably sat in some Pentagon filing system gathering digital dust. Her mouth opened, closed. "Not your problem anymore," she told herself. "Not your world." But the words came out anyway, quiet, almost apologetic. The firing pin spring. Silence dropped over the armory like a physical weight. Hutchison turned slowly. "Excuse me?" "The spring." Jenna kept her eyes down, cursing herself even as she continued. There was a defective batch manufactured around 2019. Some units reported similar failures, insufficient tension in the spring mechanism. You could have heard a pin drop, or, in this case, a firing pin. Staff Sergeant Palmer materialized from the adjacent room. "How would you know that?" "I read about it somewhere." The lie tasted like copper, like blood, like all the other compromises she'd made to stay hidden. Hutchison. Hutchison crossed to the workbench, picked up the spring, examined it with the careful attention of someone who suddenly realized he might be wrong about something. Lieutenant Drummond found her voice first. "She's guessing. Contractors don't know armorer specifications." "Check the manufacturing stamp," Jenna said, then immediately regretted it. One of the younger Marines grabbed a magnifying glass, peered at the tiny numbers etched into the spring's base. 2019A, just like she said. Patterson, who'd followed Jenna into the armory, leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Hutchison set the spring down with excessive care. And you read about this where, exactly? Technical bulletin, online. Each word felt like pulling shrapnel from a wound. Which bulletin? I don't remember, sir. I read a lot. Do you? Hutchison's voice had gone quiet. Dangerous. Do you read a lot of military technical bulletins in your spare time? I like learning about mechanical systems. Palmer snorted. That's real specific knowledge for someone who likes learning. Drummond moved closer, predator instinct fully engaged now. How do you know to check the manufacturing stamp? That's not common knowledge. Jenna stopped. There was no good answer. No explanation that didn't create more questions. Patterson finally spoke. Maybe she's just observant. All eyes turned to him. Or, Hutchison said slowly, we need to have a conversation about who exactly Green Zone Services is hiring. He pulled out his phone, started typing. I want a full background check on this contractor, clearance verification, employment history, everything. Jenna felt her carefully constructed world beginning to crack. Sir, that's not necessary. I was just trying to help. You were just demonstrating knowledge that civilian cleaning personnel shouldn't possess. Hutchison's finger hovered over the send button. So, let's find out exactly what else you know. Patterson caught Jenna's eye. Something passed between them. Recognition. Warning. The silent communication of people who'd both learned to read situations 3 moves ahead. Major, Patterson said carefully. Maybe we should verify the spring issue first before we start investigating helpful civilians. I can do both, Gunny. He sent the message. Jenna returned to her supply closet, hands moving on autopilot, filling her cart with chemicals she didn't need. Behind her, the Marines had already replaced the spring with one from current stock. Rifle functioned perfectly, which meant she'd been right. Which meant she'd just painted a target on her own back. Palmer appeared beside her, close enough that she could smell his gun oil and sweat. You're either really smart or really stupid, mop lady. Just observant, like the gunny said. That wasn't observation, that was expertise. His grin had vanished entirely. So who are you really? Jenna met his eyes for the first time. I'm exactly who my ID says I am. We'll see. She pushed her cart toward the exit, feeling 16 eyes tracking her movement. The weight of their attention pressed against her shoulders like 60 pounds of combat gear she no longer had the right to wear. Outside, the sun had climbed higher. Heat shimmered off concrete. Jenna's phone buzzed. A text from her supervisor at Green Zone Services. Base security requesting employee verification. Did something happen? She stared at the message, at the careful life she'd built from the wreckage of who she used to be. 48 hours, she'd thought. She'd been optimistic. By 14:30 hours, the entire base knew something was happening at the firing range. Word traveled through a forward operating base faster than radio transmission. Contractor knows things she shouldn't. Major Hutchison's pissed. They're going to test her. Phones were already out, recording angles secured, social media posts queued for the moment internet access returned. Jenna arrived with her cleaning cart because that was still her job, still her cover. The range sprawled across a quarter-mile of desert hardpan, berms built from sand and concrete, target frames standing at intervals like silent witnesses. 80 Marines had gathered. Training evolution forgotten. This was better entertainment. Major Hutchison stood at the firing line, arms crossed over his Ranger tab. Staff Sergeant Palmer beside him, that grin back in full force. Lieutenant Drummond checking her phone, probably coordinating with security about that background check. Master Gunnery Sergeant Patterson observed from the tower, elevated position giving him overview of the entire scene. His weathered face revealed nothing, but his posture had shifted, alert, anticipatory. Corporal Torres stood with a group of junior Marines, young face troubled. He'd tried to help yesterday, been shut down. Now he watched another humiliation taking shape and knew he was too junior, too invisible himself to stop it. Contractor Reeves. Hutchison's voice carried across the range. Join me at the line. Jenna abandoned her cart, walked across open ground with every phone tracking her movement. The sun beat down like a physical presence, 98 degrees. Her contractor polo already soaked through with sweat. She stopped 3 feet from Hutchison, maintained that careful balance between civilian casualness and military bearing. "Sir, you know a lot about weapon systems," Hutchison said. "Impressive for someone who cleans toilets." Scattered laughter, Palmer's loudest. "Since you're such an expert, I have a proposition." Hutchison gestured to the bench behind him. An M4 carbine lay disassembled, components arranged in deliberate disorder. Standard Marine qualification. Field strip and reassemble, blindfolded, under 60 seconds. The crowd pressed closer. This was content gold. "Sir, I'm not authorized." "I'm authorizing you, right now." Hutchison's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Unless you were just guessing earlier? Lucky shot of knowledge? Is that what it was, contractor? Luck?" Jenna looked at the weapon, at the crowd, at Patterson in the tower. His slight nod so small anyone else would have missed it. She was tired. Tired of hiding. Tired of performance. Tired of letting people like Hutchison decide what she was worth based on the shirt she wore. "No, sir," she said quietly. "It wasn't luck." "Then prove it." Lieutenant Drummond produced a blindfold, standard issue, thick enough to eliminate peripheral vision. She handed it to Hutchison with something like glee in her sharp features. Jenna removed her work gloves. Her hands showed themselves for the first time, calloused, scarred along the knuckles. The specific wear pattern of someone who'd spent years gripping polymer and steel. Palmer saw it. His grin faltered. Patterson leaned forward in the tower. Jenna accepted the blindfold, tied it herself, double knot, regulation tight. The world went dark. She knelt at the bench, let her hands find the weapon components by touch. The crowd noise faded. The heat faded. Everything faded except the familiar weight of purpose. "On my mark," Hutchison said. 3, 2, 1, go." Her hands moved. Muscle memory didn't forget, couldn't forget. 10,000 repetitions in 100 different conditions had carved the pattern into her nervous system deeper than conscious thought. Upper receiver, lower receiver, buffer spring, buffer, bolt carrier group, charging handle. Each component found its place with mechanical inevitability. 30 seconds. The crowd had gone silent, phones steady. Even Palmer had stopped grinning. Patterson leaned forward in the tower. Jenna accepted the blindfold, tied it herself, double knot, regulation tight. The world went dark. She knelt at the bench, let her hands find the weapon components by touch. The crowd noise faded. The heat faded. Everything faded except the familiar weight of purpose. "On my mark," Hutchison said. 3, 2, 1, go." Her hands moved. Muscle memory didn't forget, couldn't forget. 10,000 repetitions in 100 different conditions had carved the pattern into her nervous system deeper than conscious thought. Upper receiver, lower receiver, buffer spring, buffer, bolt carrier group, charging handle. Each component found its place with mechanical inevitability. 30 seconds. The crowd had gone silent, phones steady. Even Palmer had stopped grinning. Grinning. Firing pin, cam pin, bolt. Each piece slotted home with the soft clicks of precision engineering. 45 seconds. Hutchison checked his stopwatch, checked it again like the numbers might be lying. Jenna's hands completed the sequence. Functions check. Magazine well clear. Charging handle cycled smooth. She set the weapon down, removed the blindfold. The timer read 38 seconds. Marine qualification standard was 60 seconds. Expert level was 45. She'd just done it in 38, in 98-degree heat, blindfolded, on her first attempt. The silence lasted exactly 4 seconds. Then someone in the back started clapping. Others joined. Within moments, 80 Marines were applauding, the sound echoing off the berms like artillery fire. Hutchison's face had gone the color of fresh blood. "Lucky," he said, but his voice cracked on the word. Palmer stepped forward. "Sir, that wasn't." "Set up the shooting course. 200 yards, standing position, 10 rounds." Hutchison was improvising now, throwing challenges like punches. Let's see if her aim is as good as her assembly skills. Drummond touched his arm. "Major, maybe we should—" "Set it up, Lieutenant." Patterson's voice crackled over the radio from the tower. "Major Hutchison, recommend we stop this exercise." "Noted, Gunny. Recommendation denied." Targets went up at 200 yards, standard man-sized silhouettes, the distance where most Marines transitioned from confident to merely competent. A lance corporal handed Jenna the M4 she'd just assembled. Fresh magazine, 10 rounds of 5.56 millimeter. The weapon felt right in her hands. Felt like coming home to a house that had burned down. "Whenever you're ready, contractor." Hutchison's tone had shifted. Less mockery, more genuine curiosity mixed with growing dread. Jenna checked the chamber, seated the magazine, assumed standing position. Every instructor she'd ever had spoke in her memory. Breath control, sight picture, trigger squeeze, don't pull. The fundamentals didn't change whether you wore a uniform or a contractor polo. She fired. 10 rounds in 12 seconds. Controlled pairs, smooth trigger reset between shots, muzzle barely moving from point of aim. The range went silent again. Target pulled. An observer called out from the 200-yard line, voice carrying in the stillness. 9 center mass, 1 headshot. The grouping measured 4 inches, at 200 yards, standing unsupported. Expert Marine qualification required an 8-inch group. She'd just cut that in half. Palmer's mouth hung. Drummond stared at her phone like it might explain what she'd just witnessed. Torres grinned despite himself, justice tasting sweet even secondhand. Hutchison grabbed the target when it arrived, studied the holes like they were written in a language he couldn't read. His hands were shaking. "Who trained you?" The question came out hoarse. "I trained myself, sir." "Bullshit." He thrust the target toward her face. "This is operator-level accuracy. This is years of professional training. So I'll ask again, who are you?" "I'm a contract cleaner." "No." Patterson climbed down from the tower, boots hitting sand with purpose. He crossed the range, crowd parting automatically. Stopped next to Hutchison. "She's something else entirely." "Gunny." "Those hands," Patterson pointed. "Trigger finger callousing. Support palm wear pattern. That's not hobby shooting, Major. That's professional." Hutchison turned on him. "Then who is she?" "That's what I'm trying to tell you to find out before you humiliate yourself further." But Hutchison was past listening, past thinking. His carefully controlled world had just been shattered by a woman in a contractor uniform, and the only response he knew was escalation. "Staff Sergeant Palmer, set up the stress course, full combat scenario, moving targets, obstacles, timer, everything." Palmer hesitated. "Sir, she's a civilian." "She's something, and we're going to find out what." Hutchison pointed at Jenna. "Unless you want to stop now, admit you're in over your head, walk away." Jenna looked at the weapon in her hands, at the crowd of Marines watching her with new eyes, at Torres silently begging her to be careful, at Patterson, whose expression said he already knew how this would end. She should stop, should walk away, should protect what remained of her cover. But 3 years of invisibility had built pressure behind her sternum like an overinflated tire. And Derek Hutchison represented every person who'd ever judged her worth by her uniform instead of her character. Set up the course, Major. His smile was pure venom. With pleasure. The stress course sprawled across the eastern section of the range like a miniature war zone. 3 plywood structures simulating buildings, pop-up targets at random intervals, a climbing wall, tire obstacles, everything designed to test speed, accuracy, and decision-making under pressure. The current base record stood at 3 minutes, 8 seconds, held by Staff Sergeant Palmer, his name written on the board in fading marker like a small monument. Monument to competence. By 1500 hours, the crowd had swollen to over 100 Marines. Word had spread beyond the range. Off-duty personnel arrived, drawn by rumors of the impossible. Phones formed a perimeter of digital witnesses. Major Hutchison stood at the start line, explaining the course with the careful precision of someone constructing a trap. 6 rooms to clear, 12 targets total, 8 hostile, 4 friendly. You engage hostiles only. Climbing wall, low crawl under wire, weapon transition at Station 3. He paused, letting the complexity sink in. Current record is 3 minutes, 8 seconds. Most civilians can't finish at all. Jenna stood listening, hands loose at her sides. Her contractor polo clung to her back with sweat. Green eyes tracked the course layout with the kind of focus that made Patterson, watching from 20 feet away, absolutely certain of what he was seeing. Lieutenant Drummond approached with a plate carrier and helmet. Standard training gear. You'll need these, safety regulations. Jenna accepted them. The weight settled on her shoulders like muscle memory made physical. She adjusted the straps without thinking, movements automatic, efficient. The helmet fit perfectly, because all helmets fit the same when you'd worn them for years. Palmer handed her a training M4 loaded with simulation rounds. Weapon transition station has a training pistol, standard Beretta M9. Ever handled one of those? Once or twice. His expression said he no longer believed a single word from her mouth. Corporal Torres pushed through the crowd, babyface flushed. "Ma'am, you don't have to do this." "I know, Corporal. He's trying to embarrass you." "I know that too." Torres wanted to say more, wanted to warn her that she was playing a game with rules designed for her failure. But something in her eyes stopped him, a calm that shouldn't exist before this kind of challenge. Master Gunnery Sergeant Patterson moved beside Hutchison, kept his voice low. "Major, I strongly recommend you stop this exercise, right now." "Why, Gunny?" She volunteered. "Because I've been doing this for 28 years, and I know what I'm looking at." "Enlighten me." "That's not a civilian, sir." Hutchison's jaw tightened. "Then this course will prove it." "It will," Patterson agreed, "but not the way you think." Jenna moved to the start line, checked her weapon with professional efficiency. Chamber, magazine, selector switch. Her hands performed the ritual without conscious direction. Hutchison raised his stopwatch. On your mark. She assumed a ready stance. Weight balanced. Weapon at low ready. Breathing controlled. Go. She moved. The first room required button hook entry, a technique that kept the operator's weapon oriented toward the greatest threat area while minimizing exposure. Jenna flowed through the door, muzzle tracking left as her body cleared right. Pop-up target, hostile, 2 rounds center mass. Target down. Second target, friendly, weapon lowered. She held fire, continued scanning. Time, 8 seconds. Outside, Patterson whispered to the Marine beside him. That's Force Recon entry procedure. The second structure required dynamic entry through multiple doorways. Jenna moved with what instructors called combat glide, a movement technique that kept the upper body stable while legs absorbed terrain irregularity. 0 wasted motion. Every step placed with purpose. 3 hostiles in rapid succession. She engaged with controlled pairs. Each shot deliberate. Brass ejected in golden arcs, catching sunlight. A friendly target popped at close range. Her finger came off the trigger before conscious thought could interfere. Held fire. Continued movement. Time, 34 seconds. Hutchison stared at his stopwatch like it had personally betrayed him. The climbing wall stood 12 feet high, angled at 60 degrees. Jenna slung her weapon across her back using the single-point retention technique, approached the wall at a run, and scaled it using three-point contact that any mountaineering instructor would recognize. She cleared the top, transitioned her weapon back to ready position mid-descent, and landed in a combat crouch that absorbed the impact through her legs. Time, 58 seconds. Palmer's face had gone pale. "That's not possible." "Apparently it is," Drummond said quietly. The low crawl required covering 30 feet under simulated barbed wire, while maintaining weapon control. Most Marines struggled here, exhausted from previous stations, arms burning. Jenna moved like she was teaching a class on the subject. Elbows driving forward, weapon cradled, body profile minimized. She cleared the wire in 20 seconds. Station 3 held the weapon transition. Training pistol on a table. She dropped the M4's magazine, cleared the chamber, placed it on safe, and drew the Beretta in one continuous motion. The pistol came up to eye level like an extension of her hand. 2 targets, 4 rounds, all center mass. Time, 1 minute 41 seconds. The crowd had stopped recording. They just watched now, phones lowered, witnessing something that would require explanation they couldn't provide. The final 2 rooms tested decision-making under stress. Targets mixed hostile and friendly in rapid presentation. Split-second choices. Most Marines took extra seconds here, afraid of shooting the wrong target. Jenna moved through like she'd designed the course herself. Hostile, engage. Friendly, hold. Hostile, engage. Her weapon barked in controlled rhythm. Each decision instant, accurate, absolute. She exited the final door, weapon-oriented downrange, and called clear with the kind of authority that made every Marine in earshot stand a little straighter. Hutchison's thumb pressed the stopwatch. The numbers glowed in the harsh sunlight. 2 minutes, 14 seconds. Palmer's record was 3 minutes, 8 seconds. She'd beaten it by 54 seconds. On her first attempt. In contractor clothing. After working all morning in 98-degree heat. The silence that followed felt like the moment before an explosion. That compression of air before violence rewrites the world. Then someone started clapping. Slow, deliberate. Patterson. His weathered hands coming together with the sound of judgment rendered. Others joined. Within seconds, 100 Marines applauded, the sound rolling across the desert like thunder. Jenna removed her helmet, set down the weapon with the same careful attention she'd shown cleaning mess hall floors, unstrapped the plate carrier. Underneath, her contractor polo was soaked through. The edge of that tattoo showed again at her wrist. Numbers that would mean everything if anyone looked close enough. Hutchison approached, stopwatch still clutched in his hand. His face had transitioned through shock into something approaching panic. Because he wasn't stupid. Arrogant, yes. Insecure, absolutely. But not stupid enough to miss what he'd just witnessed. "Who trained you?" His voice barely audible over the crowd noise. "I told you, I trained myself." "No." He grabbed her arm, then immediately released it when she looked at his hand. That was operator-level performance. That was years of professional instruction. That was... He stopped, really looked at her for the first time. Saw the calluses, the scars, the way she held herself, even now. Weapon gone, surrounded by Marines. Still maintaining situational awareness. Still tracking threats. "You're military," he said. "Active duty or veteran? You have to be." "I'm a contractor, Major. My ID says so." "Then prove it." Drummond pushed through the crowd, phone in hand. "Sir, security just sent the background check results." Hutchison grabbed the phone. "Read the screen." His expression shifted from confusion to anger to something approaching fear. "Employment gap," he read aloud. 2019 to 2023. 4 years unaccounted for. He looked up. "What were you doing for 4 years, Contractor Reeves?" "Personal time." "Bullshit. You have security clearances that don't match civilian contractor status." Level 3 visible, but the system flags additional compartmented accesses that require O6 authorization to view. Patterson moved closer. Major, I recommend you stop talking. Why? Because you know what she is? Because you're about to make this much worse for yourself. But Hutchison was beyond listening, beyond thinking. His world had inverted, and the only response he knew was to attack. She's either stolen valor or she's active duty operating under false credentials. Either way, that's illegal. He raised his voice to carry across the range. Security to the range. Detain this individual until proper authorities arrive. 2 MPs approached, hands near their sidearms, but not touching. They looked uncertain, looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. Jenna didn't resist, didn't argue, just stood there with that same disturbing calm she'd maintained through everything. "Ma'am," the senior MP said quietly, "we need you to come with us." "Of course." Torres stepped forward. "Sir, this is wrong." "Corporal, stand down or join her." Torres subsided, fists clenched. As the MPs led Jenna away, Patterson made a phone call, walked 20 feet from the crowd, spoke quietly into his phone with the kind of urgency that suggested he was calling someone important. Hutchison watched her go, watched his carefully managed world crumble around the edges, and knew with absolute certainty that he'd just made a catastrophic mistake. He just didn't know how catastrophic yet. The temporary holding room measured 12 by 12 feet. Concrete walls painted institutional beige. Single metal chair bolted to the floor. Not a jail cell, not officially. But the locked door made distinctions irrelevant. Jenna sat perfectly still, hands resting on her thighs, breathing controlled. 1600 hours. The room held residual heat from the day, turning the space into a passive oven. Sweat traced lines down her temples. She didn't wipe it away. Outside, the base had become a hive of activity. Video footage spread through personal devices faster than any official communication could travel. Contractor destroys course record. Major Hutchison orders her detained. Everyone had opinions. Nobody had facts. Corporal Torres stood in the corridor outside, unauthorized and unnoticed. He'd followed the MPs, some instinct telling him this mattered more than any training evolution. Through the door's small window, he watched Jenna sit motionless and wondered what kind of person maintained that level of control. A Black Hawk helicopter settled onto the landing pad at 1625 hours, rotor wash sending dust clouds across the compound. Unscheduled arrivals meant command attention. Marines stopped their activities to watch. Colonel William Garrett stepped out, 5'11" of lean authority earned through 30 years of service. Gray crew cut. Steel gray eyes that missed nothing. A slight limp from an old injury that he refused to let slow him down. At 52 years old, he carried himself like a man who'd made hard decisions and learned to sleep anyway. He'd been conducting routine inspections at 3 forward operating bases. This was his second stop. The visit had nothing to do with contractor personnel issues, because he didn't know there were contractor personnel issues, until Master Gunnery Sergeant Patterson called him. Major Hutchison met him at the pad, saluting with precision that tried to mask nervousness. "Colonel Garrett, sir, we weren't expecting you until 1800 hours. Plans changed, Major." Garrett returned the salute. "I understand you have a situation." "Sir, yes, civilian contractor with suspicious background and military-level skills, possible espionage or stolen valor. I've detained her pending proper investigation." Garrett's expression didn't change. "Show me." They walked through the compound, Hutchison explaining the day's events with the careful editing of someone constructing a defensible narrative, left out the humiliation, emphasized the security concerns, made it sound like he'd discovered a threat rather than created a disaster. Patterson intercepted them outside the operations center. "Colonel, I need to speak with you first." Hutchison bristled. "Gunny, I'm briefing the colonel." "With respect, Major, you're briefing him on your version. He needs the full picture." Garrett held up one hand. "Major Hutchison, wait here. Gunny, walk with me." They moved 20 feet away, spoke in voices too low to carry. Hutchison watched Patterson's face, watched Garrett's posture shift, and felt his certainty begin to crack. After 2 minutes, Garrett returned alone. His expression had hardened into something dangerous. "Take me to her, now." The temporary holding room door opened. Jenna stood automatically when Colonel Garrett entered, her body assuming parade rest before conscious thought could intervene. Heels together, hands clasped behind back, eyes forward. Hutchison saw it, saw the military bearing she couldn't hide anymore. "At ease," Garrett said quietly. Jenna shifted to at ease, feet shoulder-width apart, hands remaining behind her back. The position was perfect, practiced, involuntary. "How long have you been at this base?" "6 months, sir." "Doing what?" "Facilities maintenance, cleaning services." Garrett studied her face. Recognition flickered in his gray eyes, quickly suppressed. "These officers have questions about your background. Major Hutchison believes you may be operating under false credentials." "My credentials are legitimate, sir." "But incomplete." Gemma said nothing. Hutchison stepped forward. "Sir, she refuses to explain her training. She has clearance levels that don't match her employment. She demonstrated expert-level combat skills. Something is wrong here." "I agree, Major. Something is definitely wrong." Garrett turned to him. "What security clearance do you hold?" "Secret, sir, with some compartmented accesses for joint operations planning." "Top secret?" "No, sir, not full scope." "Then you're not authorized to know why her clearances exist." Garrett's voice carried the weight of absolute authority. "Gunny Patterson, clear this room. Everyone below top secret SCI, out, now." Lieutenant Drummond and Staff Sergeant Palmer, who'd been watching from the corridor, exchanged glances. Drummond opened her mouth to protest. "That includes you, Lieutenant. Out." They left, reluctant, angry, curious. Torres backed away from his observation point before anyone could notice he'd been there. Only Garrett, Patterson, and Hutchison remained. Hutchison's face had gone pale. "Sir, what's going on?" Garrett closed the door, turned to Jenna. "Captain Reeves, that is still your rank, correct?" The word hung in the air like a grenade with the pin pulled. "Captain." Hutchison's mouth opened, closed, opened again. No sound emerged. Patterson stood at parade rest, expression neutral, but something like vindication flickered in his weathered features. Jenna's jaw tightened. "Sir, I'm not currently." "You're on indefinite medical hold, which means you're still active duty, still holding rank, and still subject to military justice. So I'll ask again. Captain Reeves, is that still your rank?" A long silence. Then, quietly, "Yes, sir." Hutchison found his voice. "Captain, she's a contractor. Her ID says—" "Her ID says what it needs to say, Major." Garrett's tone could have stripped paint. "Captain Jenna Reeves, formerly of 2nd Force Recon Company, Marine Special Operations Command. 8 years active duty, 6 deployments to classified locations, 12 special operations that don't officially exist." He let that sink in. Watched Hutchison's face cycle through disbelief, shock, and dawning horror. In 2021, her team was conducting operations in an undisclosed location. 6-person Force Recon unit attached to a MARSOC task force. They were ambushed. 5 killed in action, 1 survivor. Garrett gestured to Jenna. She extracted herself and a high-value intelligence asset while wounded. Engaged 11 enemy combatants. Eliminated the threat. Saved classified intelligence that prevented 3 separate terrorist attacks. Patterson, who'd suspected most of this, still reacted to the specifics. 11 enemy fighters? Wounded? Alone? She was awarded the Silver Star in a classified ceremony. 3 Purple Hearts, nominated for promotion to Major. Hutchison's voice emerged as a whisper. "Sir, I didn't know." "You didn't ask." Garrett's words cut like scalpels. You saw a woman in contractor clothing and decided what she was worth. He turned back to Jenna. The Corps tried to promote you. You refused. Tried to discharge you. You disappeared instead. Medical hold was my compromise. You were supposed to check in monthly. I stopped after 3 months, sir. Why? For the first time, emotion cracked through Jenna's controlled exterior. Because every time I checked in, someone wanted to talk about what happened, about my team, about how I survived when they didn't. Her voice roughened. I couldn't lead anyone else, sir. Couldn't be responsible for more deaths. So I found a way to serve without the weight. Cleaning floors? Being invisible, sir. Being around Marines without the burden of command. Garrett's expression softened fractionally. We've been looking for you for 24 months, Captain. I've had people checking active duty rosters, veteran organizations, hospitals. Never thought to check civilian contractors on active bases. That was the idea, sir. Hutchison attempted words. Captain, I apologize. I had no idea who you were. Jenna looked at him for the first time with her real eyes. Not the contractor's submission, not the careful invisibility. The gaze of someone who'd survived. I've hell and learned what truly mattered. You had no idea because you never asked my story, Major. You saw a woman with a mop and decided I was worthless. That kind of judgment gets people killed. I made a mistake. You made several. Garrett's voice cut across the room. You'll report to my office at 1800 hours. We'll discuss consequences then. He opened the door. Outside, a crowd had gathered despite orders to disperse. Word had spread. Captain, Silver Star, Survivor. Garrett stepped into the corridor first. His voice carried across the compound. This base will come to attention. The response was immediate, automatic. 100 Marines snapped to attention simultaneously. Captain Reeves, front and center. Jenna stepped through the door, still wearing her contractor polo, still sweating in the evening heat. But everyone saw her differently now, saw what had always been there, invisible beneath assumptions. Colonel Garrett rendered a salute. Slow, deliberate, the highest form of military respect. Patterson followed immediately, his hand snapping to his brow. Then every Marine present, even Hutchison, forced by protocol and shame to salute the woman he'd spent the day humiliating. Jenna returned the salute, muscle memory and training overriding 3 years of practiced invisibility. Somewhere in the crowd, Torres grinned so hard his face hurt. Colonel Garrett's office occupied the northern corner of the operations center, windows offering a view of the entire compound. At 1800 hours, the desert sun had begun its descent, painting everything in shades of amber and copper. Major Derek Hutchison stood at attention before the desk. Staff Sergeant Palmer and Lieutenant Drummond flanked him, equally rigid. All three stared at the wall behind Garrett's head, unable to meet his eyes. Garrett sat reviewing the day's incident reports on his tablet. Video footage, witness statements, the complete picture of how 3 professional military personnel had spent their day tormenting someone they assumed couldn't fight back. He let the silence stretch, let them sweat. Finally, he set down the tablet. Explain. Hutchison's voice came out steady through sheer force of will. Sir, no excuse. I failed to verify information before making assumptions about Contractor Reeves's background. Captain Reeves, Garrett corrected. She outranks 2 of you. The words landed like physical blows. You didn't fail to verify information, Major. You failed to treat another human being with basic respect. Garrett forward. You saw someone in a service position and decided they were beneath you, beneath notice, beneath dignity. He pulled up video on his screen, turned it to face them. Staff Sergeant Palmer, is this you deliberately kicking a tray onto freshly mopped floor? Palmer's jaw tightened. Yes, sir. Lieutenant Drummond, is this you forcing Captain Reeves to step back into her cleaning cart? Yes, sir. And Major Hutchison, is this you orchestrating public humiliation of a decorated combat veteran suffering from PTSD? Hutchison's face had gone gray. Sir, I didn't know about the PTSD. Would it have mattered? If she'd been a contractor with no military background, would that have made your behavior acceptable? Silence. Answer the question, Major. No, sir. You're damn right, no. Garrett stood, moving to the window. Outside, Marines conducting evening formation. Normal operations continuing while he dismantled careers. Major Hutchison, you're relieved from Joint Operations Planning effective immediately. You'll be reassigned to Logistics Coordination at Camp Lejeune. Someone there can teach you what leadership actually means. Hutchison's shoulders slumped fractionally. Joint operations had been his career goal. His proof of relevance? Gone in one sentence. Staff Sergeant Palmer, you're removed from all training instructor duties. Reassigned to basic admin. Your instructor certification is revoked pending completion of leadership and respect training. Palmer's face flushed red. Instructor rating affected promotion to gunnery sergeant. He'd just lost 2 years of career progression. Lieutenant Drummond, formal counseling documented in your service record. Your security clearance upgrade is denied pending review. You'll complete the same leadership training as Staff Sergeant Palmer. Drummond's hands clenched behind her back. Security clearance denial meant her intelligence career had just hit a wall. All 3 of you are fortunate Captain Reeves isn't pressing charges. What you did constitutes harassment under UCMJ Article 93. I could have you court-martialed. Sir, Hutchison managed. Permission to speak to Captain Reeves, to apologize properly? Denied. You'll leave her alone until she decides if she wants to hear from you. Garrett returned to his desk. Dismissed. They filed out. Careers damaged, futures uncertain. In the corridor, they passed Master Gunnery Sergeant Patterson, who didn't acknowledge their existence. Patterson entered, closed the door. Sir, Captain Reeves. Taze is in the NCO quarters. Hasn't left since formation. How is she? Hard to tell, sir. She's good at hiding. Garrett rubbed his face. I put her on medical hold to give her time. Thought mandatory counseling and admin work would help. Instead, she ran. She didn't run, Colonel. She found another way to serve. By cleaning toilets? By being around Marines without the weight of command. Patterson moved to the window. She told me something when I found her after formation. Said her team leader, Staff Sergeant Collins, taught her that leadership isn't about being the loudest voice. It's about making sure every voice gets heard. Collins was a good Marine. She watched him die, sir. Watched all of them die. And survived because she was better at killing than they were at dying. The blunt assessment hung in the air. That's survivor's guilt talking, Patterson continued. She thinks she doesn't deserve to lead because she lived. So she found a way to serve where nobody could die on her watch. Garrett was quiet for a long moment. What do you recommend, Gunny? Give her a choice. Real choice, not orders. She needs purpose, but it has to be her purpose. And if she chooses to disappear again, then we let her go, sir. Sometimes the best thing we can do for our warriors is let them heal on their terms. Garrett nodded slowly. Send her in. Jenna entered 5 minutes later, having changed into clean contractor clothing. Her hair remained pulled back tight. Green eyes cautious. Sit, Captain. She sat, posture perfect despite the civilian clothes. I owe you an apology, Garrett began. I should have worked harder to find you. Should have anticipated you'd go to ground somewhere in the military community. You gave me options, sir. I chose poorly. You chose survival. There's no shame in that. He pulled a file from his desk drawer. Her service record, commendations, medical evaluations, the paper trail of a warrior trying to become invisible. Your psychiatrist recommended extended leave. No combat operations, no command responsibility. Suggested teaching or training roles. I can't teach people to do what got my team killed, sir. You didn't get your team killed. The enemy did. I was team leader. I made the call to advance. My decision, my responsibility. Garrett had read the after-action report, knew the decision had been tactically sound, knew the ambush had been sophisticated and well-planned, knew that 6 Marines against 30 insurgents should have resulted in 6 KIA. Not 5. Your decision saved the intelligence asset and prevented terrorist attacks. Your actions under fire earned you the Silver Star. My actions got 5 Marines killed. Your actions meant 5 families got their Marines back to bury. Meant classified intelligence reached command. Meant 3 attacks that would have killed hundreds never happened. Garrett leaned forward. You don't get to dismiss your accomplishments because you survived, Captain. Jenna's hands tightened in her lap. What happens now, sir? That's up to you. I can process your discharge, give you the honorable exit you've been trying to find. He saw relief flicker across her face. Or you can come back. Not to command, not to combat operations, but to training, teaching Marines the skills that kept you alive. The relief died. Sir, I can't. You can teach without leading missions, can pass on knowledge without sending people into danger. These Marines need what you know, Captain, not just tactics and shooting. They need to learn that competence has no uniform, that respect is earned, not assumed, that judging people by their job instead of their character is dangerous. You want me to teach them not to be like Major Hutchison. I want you to teach them to be better, to see clearly, to lead with wisdom instead of ego. Jenna looked down at her hands. Calloused, scarred. The hands that had assembled weapons and pulled triggers and tried to hold her team together as they bled out in desert sand. I wake up at 0300 every night, sir. See their faces. Hear the radio chatter. Sometimes I'm back there for hours before I remember it's over. PTSD doesn't disqualify you from serving, Captain. It disqualifies you from pretending you're fine when you're not. What if I can't do it? What if I fail? Then you fail, and we figure out what comes next. Garrett's voice softened. But you won't know unless you try, and I think you owe it to Staff Sergeant Collins and the rest of your team to try. They trained you, trusted you, died beside you. Honor that by passing on what they taught. Jenna's eyes glistened. First sign of tears in 3 years. I don't know if I'm strong enough. Captain, you survived an ambush that killed 5 Marines, cleared 11 enemy fighters while wounded, then spent 3 years invisible on a military base, watching other people take credit for work you did in silence. You're stronger than you think. He slid a paper across the desk. Training Instructor Authorization. Position description. No command. Authority. No deployment requirements. Just teaching. This is an offer, not an order. You can walk away. Return to contractor work somewhere else. Disappear again. I won't stop you. Jenna stared at the paper, at the official acknowledgement that she still had value, still had purpose. Can I think about it, sir? You can. But, Captain? Garrett's expression hardened slightly. If you stay on this base in any capacity, you're coming to counseling. Real counseling with a combat trauma specialist. That's not negotiable. Yes, sir. And you're moving out of contractor housing into proper quarters. We're not having a decorated officer living in temporary trailers. Sir, I don't need... That's also not negotiable. Jenna almost smiled. Almost. Understood, sir. She stood to leave, paused at the door. Colonel, thank you for not forcing me back into command. Thank you for not giving up on the Corps entirely, Captain, even when we gave you every reason to. She left. Garrett watched through the window as she crossed the compound, still moving like she was trying not to be seen. Patterson appeared beside him. Think she'll stay? I think she needs to, whether she knows it yet or not. The sun rose at 0545 hours, painting the compound in shades of gold and shadow. Jenna stood outside the temporary quarters she'd occupied for 6 months, a small duffel bag containing everything she owned resting at her feet. She hadn't slept. Again. The nightmares had been particularly vivid. Faces of her team superimposed over faces of the Marines she'd met yesterday. Collins telling her to lead. Palmer bleeding out. Torres asking why she'd survived. Her hands shook. She forced them still. Footsteps approached from behind. She turned to find Corporal Torres, fresh from morning PT, earnest face uncertain. "Ma'am, I wanted to apologize." "For what, Corporal?" "For not doing more yesterday, in the mess hall, when they were—" he struggled with the words. "When they were disrespecting you." Jenna studied this 22-year-old Marine who thought he'd failed some test of courage. "You tried to help when it mattered, Torres. That took more guts than most people showed. But I let the major shut me down." "You're a corporal. He's a major. That's not failure, that's reality." She picked up her duffel. "Standing up for someone when you know it'll cost you something, that's real leadership. Remember that." Torres straightened slightly, carrying her words like a medal. "Yes, ma'am. Are you staying?" "Still deciding." She walked toward the new quarters Colonel Garrett had assigned, leaving Torres to his morning routine. The base was coming alive around her, Marines emerging for formation. The familiar rhythm of military life that she'd observed from the outside for 6 months. At the chow hall entrance, she nearly collided with Staff Sergeant Palmer. He stepped back immediately, hands raised slightly. Defensive posture. "Captain Reeves, ma'am." The title sat awkwardly in his mouth. Yesterday she had been mop lady, today she was ma'am. The whiplash of revelation. "Staff Sergeant." Palmer's face worked through several expressions before settling on miserable. "I need to apologize. What I did yesterday, what I've been doing for weeks, it was wrong. There's no excuse." Jenna watched him struggle, saw genuine remorse fighting with ego. "Why did you do it?" "Honestly?" He laughed bitterly. "Because the major did it first. Because everyone was watching. Because it was easier to join in than stand against it. That's at least honest." "I'm being reassigned. Admin work. Lost my instructor cert." He met her eyes. "I deserve worse." "You deserve to learn from it." Jenna shifted her duffel. "You're a good Marine, Palmer. I watched you run that course. You know your job. But you followed someone else's lead instead of your own judgment. In combat, that kind of thinking gets people killed." Palmer nodded slowly. "How do I fix it?" "You stop looking for permission to do the right thing. You see someone being disrespected, you speak up. You see injustice, you act, regardless of who's watching." "Yes, ma'am." He walked away, shoulders a little straighter despite his ruined career trajectory. Jenna continued to the chow hall, grabbed coffee and toast she wouldn't eat, and found an empty table. Lieutenant Drummond approached 10 minutes later, sat down without asking permission. Her sharp features were drawn, exhaustion evident. "I couldn't sleep," Drummond said. "Kept seeing your face. How calm you stayed while we—" She stopped, started again. "I was trying to prove I belonged, that I was tough enough, strong enough, and I did it by tearing you down. Why tell me this?" "Because I'm being honest with myself for the first time in months." Drummond stared at her untouched coffee. "I've spent my entire career fighting to be taken seriously. Female officer in intelligence, everyone questioning if I earned my position or checked a diversity box. So I became everything they expected. Hard, competitive, willing to step on anyone to prove my worth." "And how's that working for you, Lieutenant?" "My clearance upgrade was denied. My record has formal counseling. I proved I belong by proving I don't deserve to." She looked up. "I can't undo what I did, but I can learn from it, if you're willing to tell me how." Jenna sipped her coffee, studied this 26-year-old officer who'd confused strength with cruelty. "You want my advice?" "Yes, man. Stop trying to prove you belong. Just belong. Do your job with competence and integrity. Respect everyone regardless of their rank or role. Let your work speak louder than your ego. That simple? That hard. Jenna stood. Simple and easy aren't the same thing, Lieutenant. Drummond remained at the table, processing. Jenna left her there, walked back into morning sunlight that felt less hostile than it had 6 months ago. Master Gunnery Sergeant Patterson found her an hour later at the range, watching Marines conduct qualification shoots. She'd changed into fresh contractor clothes, still maintaining the civilian facade, even as everyone now knew what lay beneath. Captain, Gunny. Colonel wants to know if you've made a decision. Jenna watched a young Marine miss 3 shots in a row, frustration evident in his tense shoulders. His stance is wrong, grip too tight. He's anticipating recoil instead of managing it. You could tell him that? I'm not his instructor. You could be. Patterson moved beside her. These Marines need teachers who've been where they're going, who know the cost of mistakes, who can prepare them for reality instead of theory. I killed 11 people, Gunny, in 1 day, while bleeding from 3 separate wounds. I was good at it, too good, and my team still died. Your team died because the enemy was competent and ruthless. You lived because you were more competent and more ruthless when it mattered. Patterson's weathered face showed no judgment. That's not something to hide from. That's something to honor by making sure the next generation has the same skills. The young Marine missed again, slammed his fist against the barrier in frustration. His breathing is wrong too, Jenna said quietly. He's holding his breath instead of controlling it. So teach him. She looked at Patterson, at this veteran who'd somehow seen through her disguise from day one. What if I can't? What if I freeze up or break down or… Then I'll be there. Colonel will be there. You won't do this alone, Captain. Jenna turned back to the range, watched the young Marine fail again, saw herself at 23, learning these same lessons under Collins's patient instruction. She walked onto the range. The young Marine saw her approaching, started to salute before catching himself. She was in civilian clothes. Saluting would look ridiculous. "Your stance is wrong," she said. He blinked. "Ma'am?" Feet shoulder-width apart. Weight slightly forward. You're leaning back, anticipating recoil. The weapon should surprise you. "I know, ma'am. I just… Show me your grip." He demonstrated. She adjusted his hands, positioning fingers correctly, loosening his death grip on the polymer. "Now breathe. In through your nose, out through your mouth. Slow, controlled. You're not running a sprint. You're having a conversation with the target." She stepped back, watched him assume the corrected position. "Fire when ready." He took a breath, released it halfway, squeezed the trigger. Center mass. His eyes widened. "I hit it." "You did. Now do it again. 4 more shots. 4 more hits." His grin could have lit the compound. "Thank you, ma'am. I've been failing this qual for 2 weeks." You were fighting the weapon instead of working with it. Remember that in everything you do, Marine. She walked back to Patterson, who watched with something like satisfaction in his expression. "That looked like teaching to me, Captain. That was 1 Marine, 1 lesson. Every journey starts with 1 step." Jenna pulled out her phone, typed a message to Colonel Garrett. "I'll try. On my terms. With counseling. No promises beyond that." His response came in 30 seconds. "That's all I'm asking. Report to Training Center tomorrow, 0700. We'll figure this out together." She showed Patterson the message. "I'm probably going to fail." "Probably. Most important things require failing a few times first." "You're annoyingly optimistic, Gunny." "I'm realistic. There's a difference." He started walking back toward the operations center. "Oh, and Captain, Major Hutchison wants to apologize, personally." Colonel approved it. Jenna's jaw tightened. "When?" "Now, if you're willing." She found Hutchison in the operations center courtyard, standing at parade rest, looking like a man waiting for execution. His blonde hair showed more gray in the harsh light. His face had aged years in 24 hours. "Captain Reeves." His voice was steady through obvious effort. "Thank you for seeing me." "I'm not sure I had a choice, Major." "You did. I wouldn't have blamed you for refusing." He took a breath. I spent last night reviewing footage of what I did, what I said, how I treated you, and I'm ashamed. Good. The blunt response made him flinch. I judged you by your uniform instead of your character. I used my rank to humiliate someone I assumed couldn't fight back. I modeled leadership that was really just bullying with authority. Yes, you did. I can't undo it, can't take back the words or the actions, but I can learn from it, become better, if you're willing to tell me how. Jenna studied this man who'd represented everything wrong with leadership based on ego instead of competence. You want to know how to fix yourself, Major? Yes, ma'am. Start by treating every person you meet, regardless of rank or role, as if they might be the most important person in the room. Because sometimes they are, and you'll never know until it's too late. Hutchison nodded slowly. I will. Thank you, Captain. Don't thank me. Thank the next person you might have disrespected who won't have to endure what I did. She left him there, walked back into the compound where Marines now nodded respectfully as she passed, where invisible had become visible, where the mop lady had become Captain Reeves. It felt uncomfortable, exposed, terrifying. It felt like coming home to a house that had burned down and was slowly being rebuilt. 2 weeks later, Jenna stood before her first official class in the training center's largest room. 30 Marines sat in chairs arranged in a semicircle, ages ranging from 19 to 35, ranks from private to staff sergeant. Morning light streamed through windows that overlooked the range where she'd destroyed Palmer's record. She wore utilities now, captain's bars on her collar. The uniform felt foreign after 3 years, like wearing someone else's skin. Corporal Torres sat in the front row, notepad ready. Staff Sergeant Palmer occupied the back, no longer an instructor, but still a student. Even Lieutenant Drummond had requested permission to attend, sitting with rigid posture that betrayed her discomfort. Master Gunnery Sergeant Patterson stood at the rear, arms crossed, silent support. Colonel Garrett had introduced her 5 minutes ago with a brief summary of her service record that made the younger Marines stare and the older ones nod with recognition. Then he'd left her to it. Jenna looked at 30 expectant faces and felt her throat tighten. She'd killed 11 enemy fighters, had survived impossible odds, had maintained cover for 3 years on an active base. But standing here, responsible for teaching, felt more terrifying than combat ever had. Most of you will never see direct combat, she began, voice steadier than she felt. Statistics say maybe 10% of you will engage enemy forces, but 100% of you will face moments that test who you are. She moved to the whiteboard, wrote 3 words: competence, respect, judgment. This course isn't about making you better shooters or tacticians. Plenty of instructors can teach that. This is about making you better Marines, better leaders, better human beings. A young private raised his hand. Ma'am, what's the difference? The difference is knowing when to pull the trigger and when to hold fire. The difference is seeing people clearly instead of through assumptions. The difference is leading with wisdom instead of ego. She told them about her first deployment, about Collins, her team leader, who'd taught her that leadership meant making sure every voice got heard, about the mistakes she'd made, the lessons learned through failure. She didn't tell them about the ambush. Not yet. Some wounds needed more time. After an hour, she assigned them a task: spend the next 24 hours observing everyone they interacted with. No judgments, just observation. See what they usually missed. Dismissed. We meet again tomorrow, same time. As the room emptied, Torres approached. Ma'am, that was incredible. That was terrifying, Corporal. Didn't look it. He hesitated. Permission to ask a personal question? Granted. How do you do it? Stand up here after everything that happened? I mean, 2 weeks ago they were calling you Mop Lady. Jenna smiled without humor. Honestly, I'm still figuring that out. Some days it feels impossible. But then I remember what my team taught me, and I owe it to them to pass it on. Torres nodded. filing that answer away like precious intelligence. Palmer waited until the room cleared before approaching. "Captain, I wanted you to know I'm implementing what you said, about doing the right thing regardless of who's watching." "Good." "Yesterday, I saw a sergeant berating a junior Marine for a minor mistake, public humiliation stuff. I intervened, reminded him there are better ways to correct errors." "How'd he respond?" "Told me to mind my own business." Palmer's grin was self-deprecating, but the junior Marine thanked me later, said nobody had ever stood up for him before. That's leadership, Staff Sergeant. Remember that feeling. Lieutenant Drummond was the last to leave, lingering by the door. "Ma'am, I've been thinking about what you said, about letting my work speak instead of my ego, and I requested reassignment, intelligence liaison to training command, less prestigious but more impact, teaching analysts to see people instead of just data." Jenna felt something close to pride. "That's good work, Lieutenant. I learned from the best, eventually." Drummond left, shoulders back, purpose renewed. Patterson approached from his observation position. "Well done, Captain. Collins would be proud. Collins would have done it better. Collins isn't here. You are. Honor that." She nodded, throat tight. That afternoon, she attended her mandatory counseling session with Dr. Sarah Chen, a combat trauma specialist who'd worked with special operations personnel for 15 years. The sessions were difficult, painful, necessary. "You're still having nightmares," Dr. Chen observed. "Every night. Have you tried the techniques we discussed?" "Yes, they help sometimes. Progress, not perfection, Captain. That's all we're aiming for." Jenna stared at the office's beige walls. "I taught a class today, 30 Marines, and all I could think was, what if I fail them? What if my advice gets someone killed? What if it saves someone? That doesn't balance out." "It's not supposed to." Dr. Chen leaned forward. "Survivor's guilt tells you that you don't deserve to move forward, that you should have died with your team. But they died so you could live. Honor that by living well. I'm trying. I know. And that's enough." Evening found Jenna in her new quarters, unpacking the small box of possessions she'd kept in storage. Photos of her team, Collins's challenge coin, the silver star she'd never displayed. She arranged the photos on a shelf. 6 faces smiling at her across time and death. Martinez, 24 years old, always had terrible jokes. Washington, 29, could fix anything mechanical. Rodriguez, 22, sang off-key but with enthusiasm. Kim, 26, best shot on the team. Chen, 28, fluent in 4 languages. Collins, 35, the steady center they'd all orbited. "I'm teaching now," she told their photos, "trying to pass on what you taught me. I'm probably doing it wrong, but I'm trying." The photos didn't answer. They never did. At 0300 hours, she woke from another nightmare, gasping, reaching for a weapon that wasn't there. Her hands shook for 5 minutes before control returned. She texted Patterson, "Can't sleep, Gunny." Response came in 30 seconds. Coffee in 10. "Captain, you're not alone." They met at the empty chow hall, 2 insomniacs. Finding community in shared darkness. Patterson brought coffee strong enough to strip paint. "Bad one?" he asked. "They're all bad. Some are just worse." "You did good today, in class." "I forgot half of what I planned to say. The important parts came through anyway." Patterson sipped his coffee. "You know what the difference is between good Marines and great ones?" "What?" "Great ones keep showing up even when it's hard, even when they're scared, even when they'd rather hide." He looked at her with those weathered eyes that had seen too much. "You're showing up, Captain. That makes you great." "I don't feel great. I feel broken." "Broken things can still be useful. Sometimes they're the most useful because they've been tested and survived." They sat in companionable silence until sunrise painted the compound in new light. 3 months later, the base had transformed in subtle ways. Marines greeted each other with more respect. Officers questioned their assumptions more readily. The culture of casual cruelty had diminished, replaced by something approaching genuine community. Jenna's classes had expanded, 50 Marines now, with waiting lists. She taught combat mindset, but also empathy, tactical thinking, but also emotional intelligence, the skills that kept you alive and kept you human. She still cleaned occasionally, not as a job, but as meditation. The simple, honest work of making things better grounded her when nightmares made sleep impossible. Torres was promoted to sergeant, his leadership potential finally recognized. Palmer completed his counseling and requested transfer to training command, wanting to learn how to teach properly. Drummond's new position allowed her to influence hundreds of analysts, teaching them to see the humanity behind intelligence data. Even Major Hutchison had changed. His new position at Camp Lejeune had humbled him, taught him that leadership was service, not status. He sent Jenna a message monthly, updating her on his progress, seeking her guidance. She responded occasionally, offering advice earned through failure and pain. On the 3-month anniversary of her revelation, Colonel Garrett found her at the range, watching Marines qualify. "Captain, I've been ordered to inform you that you're being considered for promotion to major." Jenna's hand stilled. "Sir, I don't want." "I know, I told them that. They're considering you anyway. Your teaching has had measurable impact on readiness and morale. Command notices results. What if I refuse again? Then—" "You refuse. It's always your choice." Garrett stood beside her. "But Captain, your team didn't die so you could hide. They died so you could live fully. Maybe it's time to accept that you deserve to move forward." She watched a young Marine hit every target, applying the techniques she'd taught, saw the confidence replace doubt, saw competence build through patient instruction. "I'll think about it, sir. That's all I ask." That evening, Jenna sat in her quarters with her team's photos. The Silver Star sat beside them now, no longer hidden. "I think I'm okay," she told them. "Not healed, maybe never healed, but okay. Learning to live with what happened. Learning to honor you by becoming who you taught me to be." Outside her window, Marines moved through evening formation. Torres called cadence with new confidence. Palmer assisted with equipment checks, patient where he'd once been dismissive. Drummond reviewed intelligence briefs with junior analysts, teaching them to see the people behind the data. The base continued its mission. The war continued somewhere beyond these walls. But here, in this small corner of the military universe, something had shifted. Respect had replaced assumption. Competence had replaced ego. Community had replaced cruelty. And a captain who'd been invisible had taught them all to see clearly. Jenna pulled out her phone, composed a message to Colonel Garrett. "About that promotion, let's discuss terms. I'll accept if I can stay in training. No command authority, just teaching." His response came quickly. "Deal. Your team would be proud, Captain." She looked at the photos one more time, at Collins's steady gaze, at faces frozen in time while she'd been forced to continue forward. "I hope so," she whispered. "I really hope so." Through her window, the desert night settled over the compound. Stars emerged in patterns she'd learned to navigate by during night operations. The world continued spinning. The war continued somewhere. But here, tonight, Jenna Reeves was exactly where she needed to be. Teaching, serving, healing. Still broken, still struggling, still showing up. Still honoring the team that died so she could live. And maybe, finally, learning that survival wasn't something to apologize for. It was something to honor. By living well, by teaching others, by making sure their sacrifice meant something beyond loss. The nightmares would continue. The guilt would persist. The scars would never fully fade. But neither would the lessons, the love, the purpose. And that made all the difference.